Last picture, this is a rewa, pre and post sand replenishment. My summary of the coastal update is that there is capability within the council at the moment to help us manage the risks of the dynamic environment, and we're in a process of data gathering and compiling into systems information to help us make decisions with a programme of future work to carry on. We believe the next step will be a political workshop on the current state and those regional approaches, which is scheduled for August, which will then help us feed into our future work plans.
All right, thank you. Questions? Councillor Cashmore, then Councillor Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for recognising this work. It falls perfectly in part into our empowered communities approach, doesn't it? Because the locals are very, very happy to be involved with planting and coastal restoration where possible. The question I have asked before and will ask again is, the coastal work that local boards are currently doing now, they are feeling under-resourced and not capable of doing. And I know from Franklin and from Papakura there's been some requests about could this work be regionalised? What's your opinion around that?
Through the chair, Councillor Cashmore. I think that from my perspective, the community understanding and response is actually a really important element of what we're doing. I think having a regional understanding, having a systems understanding will make sure that we and the communities can work together in the areas where their ventures will be most successful. But part of what we need to be sure of through our systems understanding is of the areas where it's going to be a good investment and the areas where it might not be a good investment and a different intervention might be needed.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think the challenge might be when you tell Mr. and Mrs. Smith and Mr. and Mrs. Franks and Maraito that we're going to abandon their house to the tide and it's got a valuation of $2.5 million. That's a whole other interesting question to canvass going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Knight.
Thank you. I don't want to be negative, but I question, can we actually beat nature? And where we have done some things, how long will it last? Because I believe we can't.
Through the chair, Councillor and I have to say as an engineer, engineers can do anything, but sometimes it costs more money than others. And the question quite often comes down to investment and the value to the community of that investment. I think for the region as a whole, there may well be some difficult challenges, which when we have more data, we would like to come and workshop through with you, because intervention costs money.
Yeah, and that's precisely what I'm trying to get at, is that cost, for the return of that cost on some of these issues. Because I know there's some beaches we've said it's very difficult and erosion is going to be there. We're doing more work with them, but you go back and you see it all happening all over again. So I just want to put that on the table. So it's one that bothers me because I don't think man can beat nature. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor, Mr. Wilcox.
Thank you. How did this kaupapa, how did you take into account the kororo about Tangaroa and Tāne in that pakanga?
See, and
Okay.
Through the chair, that reference has most commonly been built into individual projects. What we're talking about here is an opportunity to set up some framework that looks at the issues regionally and addresses the very thing that you've just raised there as an important value that we need to build in. So we're well aware of that. I think some of the challenges in articulating options for a certain part of the coast and balancing up perception and values is a challenge that we need to build in a reference in the framework. Iwi values in that, and the cultural perspective definitely needs to be woven into that discussion. And what Sarah's articulated there with the actual framework, the coastal compartment management planning, a key part of that will be reference to iwi and those cultural values and how we balance that off. And I guess how we respond to that. Previous reference has taught us that in balancing our community desire versus actual buildability, we're finding that some of the cultural input around whether we're developing our coasts more or we're returning back natural processes, where we're taking our sediment from and how we're keeping it in those contained areas is really important, and that will be referenced as we go forward.
Yeah, okay. So I'm just going to reference Orewa because I know Orewa quite well. So the kororo is when you put something in the sea, it has an effect. So we built a breakwater at the river mouth, and the effect was the beach changed its shape. That's the kororo of Papatūānuku and Tangaroa. So I'm just wondering how you're going to incorporate that, because that's what I'm looking for in your presentation. How are you incorporating Māori mātauranga values into basically an engineering kororo? That's all.
And through the chair, as Paul said, the compartment plans is really where we look at the engineering and tie it in with the system, which has the processes that are driving natural change there, but also the values of the coastline, which will include Māori values, iwi values, and you know, we know there are some specific heritage elements along the coast in particular that are very important, but also how that change will happen. It's going to be articulated in those coastal compartment management plans because they're about managing the entirety of the coast, not just the structures.
Okay, yeah, okay. I'll look forward to seeing more. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. I'm really pleased to see this work because in Huia we've had a meeting with hundreds of people very, very agitated about losing their seawall and a managed retreat. So they do not want a managed retreat. But I think what it really highlighted for me,
Forced retreat.
given the local board found it a really difficult process, was that we just need to get out there and educate our communities. We're a coastal region. We've got a lot of coastline, we've got a lot of communities that absolutely, all Aucklanders just love the sea, and I find it hard to be out of the sight of it, to be perfectly honest. And I think that's the thing, we've perched ourselves on the edges all around, wherever we can get a peek, and I'm one of them as well. And I think what we've got to do is really be educating people, and so that they can understand that there may be some trade-offs here. And I'm particularly, you know, pleased to see some of this work being done. We've really got to do it, and we've also got to educate people that they may not be able to hold back the tide forever, and that there's a different way of doing things. I mean, looking at, just for a small example, a small local park, which is the only park we have, just to replace the existing seawall, which is 7 years old, was between $700,000 and $800,000. The managed retreat was about $3, but no one wanted it, and they would have just about lost all the only park they had. And then the gold-plated one, which someone in the community developed, was $1.6 million, which took into account sea level rise, but that didn't even take into account having to lift the actual park, lift the road behind it. And I think people just really didn't understand the huge impact that sea level rise is going to have in not too many years. So, and they hugely benefited from Tonkin and Taylor consultant that gave them a real understanding of the tidal flows, everything the impacts, you know, had. So I was really useful, and I hope that we can start to do that with our communities and come to some, you know, understanding of what's going to have to happen sometimes.
Well,
you know?
we'll obviously discuss that at the workshop in August. Yeah, well, I mean, these are all important points that need to be thrashed out, because
Yeah,
there's a lot
exactly.
of variables that
Exactly, that's what I'm
happen, and
saying.
one of them is
There's a lot of
obviously
worry.
cost.
Yep.
So, that's what's going to happen
Sorry,
in
Mr
August?
Chairman, for being part of the debate.
Sorry?
That's right.
Yes,
Well, I don't think, I
Mr.
mean,
Chairman,
councillor, there was a lot of narrative, and I don't know if it was a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know whether, sorry, okay, well, I'll move the recommendation so we can talk about it.
we haven't got
Sorry,
through
Mr.
the questions yet. Councillor Penrose.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Chair, and thanks, Paul and Sarah. Mine's probably just following on a little bit from where Councillor Cashmore was talking about, and talking about the parent communities and the likes. And I know over time we've had a few discussions over different matters. But it's probably around how your unit, to me, I welcome this, and I look forward to the workshop in August, because I'd like to see us go a wee bit further than this at pace, because I'm deeply concerned that we lose a lot of opportunities across the region. And where I'm coming from is that I'm hoping that your unit is working closer with some of our key people across the region. You know, as we've mentioned in the past, we've got a lot of key investors within our local communities that see a real interest in some of the seawall areas that we have, that's as we see it losing into the sea, that want to get on and get the job done and are prepared to throw some money at it. But the roadblocks is council. And whilst they're on board at the time to say, hey, you know, we're there to throw some money at it, it's the time frames it takes to get there. And by the time we get there, they've already gone off and done something else, or out of frustration. So your unit working along those lines to sort of engage in that sort of process?
We'll discuss that in August more. I mean, no, but I mean, you're kind of wanting policy to kind of be settled on today. Well, we can't do it today.
I'm just hoping to get a bit of direction, Mr Chair, like Councillor Cooper.
Oh, okay.
I was, sorry, through you, Chair. I was just going to add, one of the reasons that actually staff were keen to bring this issue to this forum and make sure it found its way into budget committee discussions was that we do need to get on top of this and take coordinated response. And so we recognise we have an issue, we want to do this, that's why we're bringing the subject, and as a result, I think we'll start to get on top of what you see as a more fractured approach from council. And that's why we're here.
And thank you, Dean. And this is not a question of budgets from council, this is funding from our other sources. So it's not involving council funds, where I'm coming from.
Yep, okay, understood. Thank you.
Councillor Fletcher.
Well, thank you. I'm delighted that this piece of work has finally come to us, and I'm really looking forward to the workshop. I'm particularly interested in drawing on some of the experiences of other councils, and if I can point to an area that has not been well managed, the TCDC and the Cook's Beach holding the tide is a fascinating example of how not to do it. But I welcome it. It's really critically important, and I think that Councillor Penrose was also conveying, you know, from a Parks perspective, as the Deputy Chair of Parks along with myself, there are huge issues for parks, but more generally, this is probably one of the biggest issues, and in terms of mitigating risk, we do need to have coherent policy, and I really think that this is going to be important. I want to make sure that we're not duplicating work across the council family. So, you know, within the parks portfolio, I am expecting that the workshop, that we're not going to have a whole series, Dean, of workshops on this, that this is going to be the one that will have that significance in terms of our funding streams, and that the policy will evolve for, you know, right across the council family from that. So I'd just like the assurance on that, Dean, and I'm just looking at the sun there, so I can't quite see your face. But that you will be able to bring us some good and bad examples. And I also note the editorial in the Herald today, and I hope that our central government politicians can actually come together in a sensible way, because this is one that defies politics. We've just got to work across the political spectrum on it, and I think the editorial today is quite useful.
Thank you.
So I can certainly give that reassurance, sorry, through the chair. Sarah is leading this. She's working very closely with Ian Maxwell and the Parks team.
CCO.
and it inevitably has to include the CCOs, so we're talking with CCOs. Auckland Transport has a road network on the coastal frontage. There are significant issues for the private landowner, so we're taking the objective to take a very joined-up approach. There will be one workshop, not multiple workshops. The significant workshop is in August.
Thank you.
Many thanks.
Councillor Hall, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I'll be brief. That was going to be my question. CCO and infrastructure, critical to this as part of our 50-year infrastructure
Correct.
review. It would be really useful, and thank you for the fantastic presentation. It would be really, really useful for us to have some live discussion, live examples of managed retreat. I know, you know, places like Dunedin with the huge flood yesterday, it's very clear that, you know, sumps are full. You could not have done any more as a council to pump out South Dunedin because sea level rise means that everything's half full already without the rain. So, you know, we need to talk at a practical level and use examples like Henderson Valley where too expensive to try and deal with flooding issues. Council board houses, move them off, it's now parkland. We need to really engage practically. So look forward to the workshop, thank you, and fantastic work.
Thank you.
Mr McDonald?